The small town of Maplewood was quiet that evening, as it usually was. Nestled between rolling hills and thick woods, it had always been the kind of place where nothing much happened. People knew each other by name. Kids rode their bikes down empty streets after school, and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. But for Laura Bennett, this particular night would change everything she thought she knew about her son and herself. Laura sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee while flipping absent-mindedly through an old magazine. Her son, Ethan, was upstairs in his room, doing what he often did when he wasn't buried in one of his science fiction novels, daydreaming. He was 15, tall for his age, with messy black hair that seemed to have a mind of its own. Most days he kept to himself, preferring books and puzzles over hanging out with friends. To Laura, he sometimes felt like a mystery wrapped in questions she couldn't quite answer. "Ethan," she called up the stairs, breaking the silence. "Are you coming down to help me clean out the attic? It won't take long if we work together." There was a pause before Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing. His blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Do we really need to do that tonight?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes," Laura replied firmly, setting her mug down. "Your grandma left us so many things, and I don't want them sitting up there gathering dust forever. Besides, who knows what treasures we might find." Ethan sighed dramatically but followed her anyway. Together they climbed the narrow staircase, leading to the attic, their footsteps creaking against the wooden boards. When they opened the door, a wave of stale air greeted them, carrying the faint smell of mothballs and memories long forgotten. Boxes were stacked haphazardly along the walls, some labeled neatly in faded marker, others completely unmarked. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting dim light over the cluttered space. For the first hour, they worked quietly, sorting through old clothes, photo albums, and trinkets that had once belonged to Laura's parents. Ethan found a box filled with baseball cards and grinned, holding up a particularly rare card triumphantly. Laura laughed, shaking her head. "You can keep those if you want. Your grandpa loved collecting them." But then something caught Ethan's eye, a dusty leather-bound photo album tucked away in the corner of a shelf. Curious, he pulled it out and blew off the layer of grime covering its surface. The cover was embossed with gold lettering that read, "Family Memories." Flipping it open, he began paging through the photographs inside. At first, the pictures were exactly what you'd expect: family gatherings, birthdays, vacations. But halfway through the album, Ethan froze. His fingers hovered over a photograph, showing 3 people, a man, a woman, and a boy who looked unmistakably like him. The caption beneath the image read, "Ethan, Laura, and John, Summer, 1973. "What?" Ethan muttered under his breath, his brow furrowing. Confused, he turned to show the picture to Laura. "Mom, look at this. Is this some kind of joke?" Laura glanced over, her expression puzzled. Then her eyes widened as she realized what Ethan was pointing at. "That's impossible," she whispered, taking the album from him. "This picture looks just like you. But it says 1973. That's decades before you were born." Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding. "It doesn't make any sense. Why does it say my name? And why do I look exactly like that kid in the picture?" Laura shook her head, trying to process what she was seeing. "I don't know, honey. Maybe Grandpa played some sort of prank. You know how he liked to mess around with stuff like this." But Ethan wasn't convinced. Something deep inside him stirred, an odd feeling, almost like déjà vu. As he flipped through the rest of the album, he noticed more photos featuring the same boy who looked like him. Each one was dated years before he should have existed. One even showed him standing beside a gravestone engraved with the words, "Ethan Bennett, beloved son." "This isn't right," Ethan said finally, his voice trembling. "Mom, I think we need to check something." "What do you mean?" Laura asked, still staring at the photos. "There's a spot in the woods behind our house," Ethan explained. "I've never been there, but lately I've been having these weird dreams about it. Like I'm supposed to go there, like it's important. And now, with this..." He gestured to the album. "I think maybe I'm supposed to dig something. Up Laura frowned, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Dig something up? Ethan, you're talking crazy. I'm serious, Ethan insisted, his expression intense. Just trust me, okay? Please. After a moment of hesitation, Laura nodded reluctantly. Fine. But if we're going to do this, let's wait until it gets dark. No one needs to see us acting like lunatics. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, mother and son gathered 2 shovels from the garage and made their way into the woods. The air grew cooler as they ventured deeper, the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves filling the silence. Finally, they reached the spot Ethan had described. A clearing dominated by a massive oak tree whose gnarled roots stretched out like skeletal fingers. This is it, Ethan said softly, looking around. I can feel it. Laura hesitated, gripping her shovel tightly. Okay, let's get this over with. They started digging near the base of the tree, the soil soft and damp beneath their tools. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but after about 20 minutes, Ethan's shovel hit something solid. Both of them froze, exchanging nervous glances. What is that? Laura whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know, Ethan replied, kneeling down to brush away the dirt. Slowly, the outline of a wooden box emerged from the earth. It was old, weathered, and slightly cracked, but unmistakably a coffin. Oh my God, Laura breathed, stepping back in shock. What have we done? Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he carefully pried open the lid, revealing the skeletal remains of a young man dressed in tattered clothing. For a moment, neither of them could speak. Then Ethan noticed something clutched in the corpse's hand, a tarnished locket. With trembling fingers, he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of him and Laura smiling together. On the back of the picture, written in neat handwriting, were the words, Ethan Bennett, 2147-2168. Before either of them could react, a strange humming sound filled the air. Looking up, they saw a glowing orb descending from the sky, hovering silently above the grave. Its light pulsed rhythmically, matching the beat of Ethan's racing heart. Suddenly, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. Laura screamed, dropping her shovel as the orb enveloped Ethan in its glow. The world around her seemed to blur and fade, leaving only the sound of her own panicked breathing. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. When Ethan finally opened his eyes, the world around him was nothing like he had ever seen before. The forest, the grave, even the glowing orb. All of it was gone. Instead, he found himself lying on a cold, smooth surface in a bright white room. Everything about the place felt strange and unfamiliar, from the hum of unseen machinery to the faint scent of something metallic in the air. He blinked several times, trying to make sense of where he was, but his mind couldn't quite grasp. "It, Ethan?" a voice called out softly. He turned his head and saw his mother, Laura, sitting beside him. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch his shoulder. "Are you okay? What happened?" I don't know," Ethan stammered, sitting up slowly. His body felt heavy, like he'd been asleep for days. "Where are we?" Before Laura could answer, a door slid open with a soft hiss, and a woman stepped into the room. She looked to be in her early 40s, with kind eyes and short blonde hair. She wore a fitted uniform made of some shiny material that shimmered faintly under the light. Around her neck hung a badge with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. "My name is Dr. Rachel Monroe," the woman said gently, kneeling down so she was at eye level with Ethan. "You're safe here, but there's a lot we need to talk about." "What? Do you mean safe?" Laura demanded, standing up protectively. "Who are you, and why does my son look like he's been through some kind of experiment?" Dr. Monroe sighed, her expression sympathetic. "I understand this must be overwhelming, but please try to stay calm. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I assure you, it's true." She paused, glancing between Ethan and Laura before continuing. "Ethan isn't just a regular teenager from your time. He's a traveler, a person sent back from the future to complete a mission critical to humanity's survival." Laura stared at her, shaking her head in disbelief. That's ridiculous. My son is 15 years old. He goes to school, plays video games, and worries about homework. How can he possibly be from the future? It's complicated, Dr. Monroe admitted. But let me explain. In the year 2168, Earth faces a catastrophic event, an extinction-level disaster caused by human mistakes. Scientists developed a program called ChronoLink to send individuals back in time to prevent the catastrophe. Ethan was one of those chosen for the mission. Ethan listened intently, his heart racing. None of this made sense, but deep down, part of him felt like it did, like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized were missing were suddenly falling into place. But if I'm from the future? Ethan asked hesitantly. Then who was that body we found in the woods? Dr. Monroe's expression darkened. That was you, or rather your future self. Something went wrong during your last jump. You lost all memory of your mission and ended up living a normal life in the past. Now, with only days left until the disaster occurs, we need to help you recover your memories and finish what you started. Laura sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. This can't be real. Time travel, extinction events, it's insane. I wish it weren't true, Dr. Monroe said quietly, but the stakes are too high to ignore. If Ethan doesn't succeed, billions of lives will be lost, including yours. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Ethan looked at his hands, noticing how they trembled slightly. Was it possible? Could he really be someone destined to save the world? Okay, Ethan said finally, his voice steadier than he expected. If this is true, then what do I need to do? Dr. Monroe smiled faintly. First, we need to access the fragments of your memory still locked in your subconscious. There's a device designed to help with that, a neural interface that will guide you through your past experiences. It won't be easy, but it's the only way. Laura grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him closer. No, I won't let you put him through this. Whatever this mission is, it's not worth risking his life. It's already at risk, Dr. Monroe countered gently. The people responsible for sabotaging Ethan's original jump, they're still out there. They'll stop at nothing to ensure the timeline remains unchanged. Staying here puts both of you in danger. Ethan glanced at his mother, seeing the fear etched into her face. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Still, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn away now. Not when so much depended on him. Mom, he said softly, placing a hand over hers. I have to do this. I don't fully understand it yet, but I feel like it's my responsibility. Maybe this is why I've always felt different, like I didn't belong. Maybe this is why. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes, but she nodded reluctantly. Just promise me you'll come back. I promise, Ethan replied, though he wasn't entirely sure he could keep it. Dr. Monroe led them to another room, where a large machine dominated the space. It resembled a reclined chair surrounded by a web of wires and glowing panels. Holographic screens floated in the air, displaying complex diagrams and streams of data. Ethan swallowed hard as he approached it, feeling a mix things, fear, excitement, and a strange sense of inevitability. This is the neural reconstruction interface, Dr. Monroe explained. It will allow us to access your memories without causing harm. However, the process may feel intense. You'll relive moments from your future life, and some of them might be difficult to confront. Ethan took a deep breath and climbed into the chair. The straps securing him were gentle but firm, holding him in place. As the machine powered on, a soft hum filled the room, and tiny sensors attached themselves to his temples. For a moment, everything went dark. Then, images began flashing before his eyes. He saw cities unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Skyscrapers reaching impossibly high into the sky, vehicles flying overhead, streets bustling with people dressed in sleek, futuristic clothing. But amid the beauty, there was destruction. Fires raged across landscapes, oceans boiled away, and skies turned black with ash. Voices echoed in his mind, shouting warnings and pleas for help. And then he saw himself. Not as a teenager, but as a grown man, standing in front of a massive control panel. His future self looked exhausted, battered, and determined. "You can still fix this," the man whispered, his voice filled with urgency. "Don't give up." The vision faded, leaving Ethan gasping for air. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he struggled to process what he had seen. Laura rushed to his side, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "It's okay," she murmured, though her own voice shook. "We'll figure this out together." Dr. Monroe watched silently, her expression unreadable. "The memories are returning," she said after a moment. "But we don't have much time. We'll need to act quickly if we hope to stop the disaster." Ethan wiped his tears away, nodding firmly. "Tell me what to do next." Though uncertainty loomed large, one thing was clear. Whatever lay ahead, Ethan was ready to face it. After recovering from the neural reconstruction session, Ethan felt different, not physically but mentally. Fragments of his future life lingered in his mind like echoes, vague yet undeniable. He remembered snippets of advanced technology, strange landscapes and urgent voices urging him to act quickly. Though the memories were incomplete, they gave him a sense of purpose he'd never felt before. Dr. Monroe explained that the key to preventing the disaster lay hidden within Ethan's own timeline. Clues had been scattered throughout history, small, seemingly insignificant events that would ripple outward and change everything if properly addressed. With this new understanding, Ethan set out to follow the trail of these clues, guided by flashes of insight from his restored memories. The first clue led them back to Maplewood. According to what Ethan could recall, there was something important, hidden in an old factory on the edge of town, a place long forgotten by most people. Laura hesitated when Ethan told her where they needed to go. She didn't trust the idea of wandering into an abandoned building, especially after everything they'd already been through. But Ethan insisted, saying he couldn't ignore the feeling, pulling him toward the location. "It's like I've been there before," Ethan said as they drove down a narrow dirt road leading to the factory. "I don't know how or why, but I know we'll find something." Laura sighed, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "This whole thing feels wrong. What if we're walking into danger again?" "We don't have a choice," Ethan replied firmly. "If we want answers, we have to keep moving forward." When they arrived, the factory loomed ahead of them like a ghost from another era. Its walls were covered in ivy, its windows shattered, and its metal doors rusted shut. Despite its decrepit appearance, Ethan felt drawn to it, almost magnetically. Together, they pushed open one of the creaking doors and stepped inside. The interior was dark and musty, filled with the smell of decay and dampness. Broken machinery lined the floor, tangled in cobwebs and dust. Laura turned on her flashlight, sweeping the beam of light across the room. It wasn't until they reached the center of the space that they saw it, the machine. It was enormous, far larger than either of them had expected. Covered in layers of grime and rust, it looked ancient, yet parts of it glowed faintly with pulsating lights. Panels embedded in its surface displayed cryptic symbols and equations that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as Ethan approached. "This is it," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "I remember now. This is the temporal stabilizer." "The what?" Laura asked, shining her flashlight on the device. "It's a machine designed to repair fractures in time," Ethan explained, running his fingers over the dusty surface. "In my future, it was used to prevent disasters like the one coming. But somehow it ended up here, in our time." Laura shook her head, struggling to wrap her mind around the concept. "How does a machine like this even exist? And why would someone hide it in a place like this?" "I don't know all the details," Ethan admitted, "but I do know that we need to activate it. If we can get it working, it might give us a chance to stop the catastrophe." As Ethan examined the stabilizer, he noticed something unusual etched into its side, a series of numbers and letters arranged in a pattern. They matched the sequence he'd seen during his memory reconstruction session. Without hesitation, he began entering the code into the machine's interface. At first, nothing happened. Then, With a low hum, the stabilizer came to life. Lights pulsed faster, growing brighter with each passing second. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing timelines and data streams that made no sense to Laura, but felt oddly familiar to Ethan. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling as loud footsteps echoed outside the factory. Someone or something was approaching. "Ethan, we need to leave," Laura urged, grabbing his arm. "Now!" "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "We're too close. If we run now, everything we've done will be for nothing." Before Laura could argue further, the door burst open and shadowy figures stormed into the room. They wore black uniforms adorned with insignias Laura didn't recognize, their faces obscured by helmets. One of them stepped forward, pointing a sleek weapon directly at Ethan. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure growled, his voice distorted by some kind of filter. "The timeline must remain intact." Ethan froze, his heart pounding. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" "We're agents of the Temporal Accord," the man replied coldly. "Our mission is to preserve history, not alter it. Your actions threaten the balance of existence." "But if I don't act, billions of lives will be lost," Ethan shouted, stepping protectively in front of the stabilizer. "Isn't saving humanity worth the risk?" "The cost is too great," the agent countered. "You cannot comprehend the consequences of your interference." Laura watched helplessly as the standoff unfolded. She knew they were outnumbered and outmatched, but she refused to let fear take over. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it at one of the agents, knocking him off balance. Chaos erupted as the other agents turned their attention to her. "Ethan, finish it," Laura yelled, dodging another attacker. "Do whatever you have to do." With renewed determination, Ethan turned back to the stabilizer. He entered the final sequence of commands, his hands moving quickly despite the chaos around him. The machine roared to life, emitting a blinding white light that filled the entire factory. The agents stumbled backward, shielding their eyes as the ground shook violently. "Mom, get down!" Ethan screamed, diving toward Laura just as the stabilizer unleashed a powerful surge of energy. Time itself seemed to warp and twist, bending reality into impossible shapes. When the light finally faded, the agents were gone, leaving only silence behind. Breathing heavily, Ethan climbed to his feet and helped Laura up. The stabilizer stood silent once more, its lights dimmed. For a moment, neither of them spoke, unsure of what had just happened. "Did it work?" Laura asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think so," Ethan replied, though uncertainty lingered in his tone. "But I'm not sure. We won't know until later." They left the factory together, exhausted but alive. As they walked back to the car, Laura glanced at Ethan, seeing him in a way she never had before. He wasn't just her son anymore. He was someone destined for greatness, burdened by a responsibility no one could fully understand. Back home, they tried to return to normalcy, but both knew things would never truly be the same. Every day, Ethan waited for signs that his actions had made a difference. And every night he dreamed of cities burning, oceans boiling, and a voice calling out to him from the future. Though the immediate danger had passed, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Somewhere, somehow, the forces working against them were still watching and waiting. Days passed after the incident at the factory, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every sound outside their house made him jump. Every shadow seemed to move just a little too deliberately. Laura noticed his unease and tried to reassure him, but even she couldn't deny the lingering tension in the air. Something or someone was still out there. Ethan spent most of his time poring over the clues he'd gathered so far. The temporal stabilizer had given them a fighting chance, but it wasn't enough. He knew there was more work to do if they wanted to truly prevent the disaster looming in the future. Each fragment of memory he recovered pointed toward one conclusion. The solution lay buried deeper in the past, hidden somewhere in the woods behind their home. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan turned to Laura with a determined, "Look, Mom, I need to go back to the grave. Laura's eyes widened in alarm. The grave? Why would you want to go there again? That place is dangerous. I think there's something we missed, Ethan explained, pacing nervously. When we dug up the coffin, we found the locket, right? But what if there's more? What if whatever's buried there can help us finish this? Laura hesitated, torn between fear and logic. She didn't want to put herself or Ethan in harm's way, but she also knew they couldn't afford to ignore any leads. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. Okay, but we're not going alone. I'll call Mr. Carter. He's always been good with tools, and he owes me a favor. Mr. Carter, a retired mechanic who lived 2 streets over, agreed to accompany them without asking too many questions. Armed with shovels, flashlights, and a sense of dread, the 3 of them ventured into the woods under the cover of darkness. The ancient oak tree stood exactly where they'd left it, its gnarled roots stretching out like skeletal fingers. Ethan knelt beside the spot where they'd unearthed the coffin days earlier, running his hands over the disturbed soil. We need to dig deeper, he said, grabbing a shovel. Whatever's down there, it's important. They worked quickly, sweat dripping down their faces despite the cool night air. After several minutes of digging, Ethan's shovel struck something hard once again. This time it wasn't wood, it was metal. Carefully, they cleared away the dirt to reveal a small, rusted box embedded in the earth. What is that? Laura asked, shining her flashlight on it. I don't know, Ethan replied, prying it open with trembling hands. Inside was a collection of strange objects. A vial filled with shimmering liquid, a folded piece of paper covered in unfamiliar symbols, and a small device resembling a pocket watch. The moment Ethan touched the watch, it began to glow faintly, emitting a low hum that resonated through the forest. Before anyone could react, the sound of footsteps echoed nearby. Heavy boots crunched against the fallen leaves, growing louder with each passing second. Shadows moved among the trees, closing in fast. Get behind me, Mr. Carter barked, brandishing a crowbar he'd brought along. But Ethan already knew who or what they were dealing with. It's them, Ethan whispered, clutching the glowing watch tightly. The agents from the factory. Sure enough, the shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, surrounding them in a tight circle. Their leader stepped forward, his voice cold and mechanical. You've meddled enough, boy. Hand over the artifact or face the consequences. Ethan glared at him, his grip tightening around the watch. If you think I'm giving this to you, you're wrong. You don't care about fixing the timeline, you only care about controlling it. The agent smirked beneath his helmet. Control is necessary. Without order, chaos reigns. Do you really believe a child can save humanity? Yes, Ethan shot back, surprising even himself with his confidence. Because I've seen what happens if I don't try. Without warning, the agent lunged forward, reaching for the watch. In that split second, Ethan pressed a button on its surface, activating a blinding burst of light. The agents recoiled, shielding their eyes as the forest erupted in chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan grabbed Laura's hand and shouted, "Run!" They sprinted through the woods, dodging trees and leaping over roots as shouts echoed behind them. Mr. Carter stayed behind, using his crowbar to slow the agents down. Though grateful for his bravery, Ethan couldn't help but feel guilty leaving him behind. Eventually, they reached the edge of the woods and collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath. Laura looked at Ethan, tears streaming down her face. What, now? Where do we go? Ethan stared at the glowing watch in his hand, thinking hard. There's one last place we haven't checked. The lake. According to my memories, it's tied to the final piece of the puzzle. Though exhausted, Laura nodded. Then let's go. We don't have much time. The lake was quiet and still, its surface reflecting the stars above like a mirror. Ethan waded into the water, guided by the watch's pulsating glow. When he reached a certain point, the device vibrated violently, signaling they were in the right spot. Taking a deep breath, Ethan dove beneath the surface. Underwater, he discovered a hidden compartment carved into the rocky bed. Inside was another object, a crystal orb etched with intricate patterns. As soon as he touched it, visions flooded his mind. Cities rebuilt, skies clear, people smiling. It was the future he'd been fighting for, proof that success was possible. But the victory was short-lived. As Ethan surfaced, holding the crystal aloft, the agents appeared on the shore, weapons drawn. "Enough games," their leader growled. "Hand it over or die." Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Then, Laura stepped forward, standing protectively in front of him. "You'll have to kill us both first," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. For a moment, no one moved. Then the leader raised his weapon, aiming directly at Laura. Ethan reacted instinctively, activating the crystal. A surge of energy exploded outward, engulfing everyone in a brilliant white light. When the light faded, the agents were gone, and the forest was eerily silent. Exhausted but alive, Ethan and Laura clung to each other, knowing they'd taken a massive step toward saving the world, but also aware that the hardest part was yet to come. As they walked home under the starlit sky, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could they keep running? And when the final confrontation came, would he be ready to make the ultimate sacrifice? The days following the confrontation at the lake were a blur for Ethan and Laura. They had survived another encounter with the agents, but the cost weighed heavily on both of them. Mr. Carter hadn't returned from the woods, and though they tried to convince themselves he was safe, deep down, they feared the worst. Still, there was no time to mourn or dwell on what might have happened. The crystal orb Ethan retrieved from the lake pulsed faintly in his hands, reminding him of the task ahead. Dr. Monroe reappeared shortly after, her expression grave but hopeful. "You've done well," she said, examining the orb. "This is the final piece needed to stabilize the timeline, but activating it won't be easy. It requires your unique biological signature. You're the only one who can do this." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even deeper onto his shoulders. "What happens if I fail?" "You won't," Dr. Monroe replied firmly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "But understand this. Completing the mission means sacrificing everything you know. Once the timeline stabilizes, your presence here will no longer exist. You'll belong fully to the future." Laura stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What does that mean for him? For us?" "It means saying goodbye," Dr. Monroe admitted softly. "Ethan's role ends once the timeline is repaired. He'll return to where and when he truly belongs." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes, but she didn't argue. Instead, she hugged Ethan tightly, holding him as if she could keep him grounded in the present forever. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what happens, remember that." Ethan clung to her, fighting back his own tears. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for believing in me." With heavy hearts, they prepared for the final step. Dr. Monroe led them to a secluded hilltop outside town, where the temporal stabilizer had been relocated. The massive machine stood ready, its panels glowing brighter than ever before. Surrounding it were holographic displays showing timelines converging and diverging like threads in a tapestry. "This is it," Dr. Monroe announced. "Place the crystal orb into the central console, Ethan. It will guide you through the process." Taking a deep breath, Ethan approached the stabilizer. He placed the orb into a recessed slot, and immediately, the machine roared to life. The ground trembled beneath their feet as beams of light shot upward, piercing the night sky. Streams of data flowed across the holograms faster and faster, until they blurred together into a kaleidoscope of colors. Ethan felt a strange pull, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around him. Memories flooded his mind. His childhood, in Maplewood, his mother's laughter, the friends he'd made along the way. But mixed with those memories were flashes of his future self, standing in control rooms, working tirelessly to prevent disasters, making sacrifices no one else could bear. "Focus, Ethan," Dr. Monroe called out over the growing hum of the machine. "You need to anchor yourself in the timeline." Closing his eyes, Ethan concentrated on the sensations coursing through him. He thought of all the lives depending on him, all the futures hanging in the balance. Slowly, he extended his hand toward the orb, which now floated inches above the console. As his fingers brushed against it, a surge of energy coursed through his body, connecting him to the stabilizer. The world around him dissolved into light. He saw two versions of himself, one young and uncertain, the other older and resolute, standing side by side. They reached out, their hands touching briefly before merging into one being. Time seemed to collapse inward, folding itself into a new pattern. When the light faded, Ethan found himself standing alone on the hilltop. The stabilizer was silent, its glow extinguished. Dr. Monroe and Laura were gone along with the town of Maplewood. In their place was a vast, vibrant city stretching endlessly across the horizon. For a moment, Ethan felt disoriented, unsure of where or when he was. Then he noticed the crystal orb still hovering beside him, now dimmed but intact. A holographic message appeared in the air, written in familiar handwriting. "Thank you, Mom. You saved us all." Ethan smiled faintly, realizing the truth. His mission was complete. The timeline had been repaired, and humanity's future was secure. Though he would never see his mother again, he knew she understood. Her love and sacrifice had given him the strength to succeed. As dawn broke over the city, Ethan walked forward, taking in the sight of a world reborn. Skyscrapers gleamed under the sunlight, flying vehicles zipped through the air, and people bustled about their lives, blissfully unaware of how close they had come to destruction. Somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He had fulfilled his purpose. Years later, Ethan stood atop a hill overlooking the thriving metropolis, now a leader among his peers. He often thought about his mother and the life he had left behind, cherishing the memories like treasures. Though he missed her dearly, he carried her spirit with him every day, guiding him toward a brighter future. And somewhere, in a small Midwestern town that existed only in an alternate timeline, Laura Bennett sat flipping through an old photo album. She paused at a note tucked between the pages, written in her son's handwriting. "Thank you, Mom. You saved us all." Though she couldn't explain it, she smiled, knowing in her heart that Ethan was exactly where he was meant to be.